Welcome to the Karma Leaders Podcast. Author Dr. Tom McDougal explores the concepts of the groundbreaking leadership book, Karma Doesn't Need My Help, 11 weekly lessons to leadership success and peace. Now, let's jump into the episode.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm glad you're here, and I'm particularly glad today to have a co-host with me, Lance Boyd. Lance and I have known each other for quite a while. He is one of the most intelligent leaders that I've run across during my career, and I'm super honored that he's going to join me for this episode. We're going to tackle some of the topics from the book. So welcome, Lance.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me, and I've enjoyed the book and look forward to getting into this. Just as a reminder for the listeners, Lance Boyd, I'm the CEO of Fairfax Radiology Centers in Fairfax, Virginia, and we're a large outpatient imaging practice that's tied closely with a large hospital system and with a very large radiology group here in the DC metro area.
Yeah. Well, your background's impressive because you've done so many different things in the industry from long-term care to acute care, and now you're working on the physician practice side some as well as the imaging side. So that diversity is very impressive, but appreciate you joining me. But Lance and I were kind of talking about what we were going to discuss during this episode. And for those of you that are reading or have read Karma Doesn't Need My Help, we're going to be really focused more than anything on week one and talk about emotions, because Lance and I share a unique characteristic not many people have. I started operating hospitals when I was 27. Lance took his first facility leadership role where he was the top leader in the organization at age 29. And so we share that. And so we're going to tackle that a little bit. So we'll jump right in. If that's good with you, Lance.
Sounds good, Tom. Thank you.
All right. One of the stories in week one is about a time that my generators failed in a hospital. Short version of this story, it's longer in the book, but the short version of this story is a suicide squirrel took out a transformer near my hospital. And our online generators, emergency generators kicked in, and we had dual generators that ran about 70–80% of the building just to keep all the patients and the staff safe, but we couldn't run everything. But you could feel the rumbling of the generators in certain sections of the building. And as I was walking around, CNO's walking around, we're checking on everybody, making sure everybody has what they need. I feel that rumble change. So I started walking towards the facility department, and then I feel the rumble go away completely. The lights are off. We are without power. And that is not a good thing in a hospital, particularly in the middle of the day when surgeries are going on, imaging studies are going on. Just pick something going on. That hospital relies on power. But when I walk into the facility department, what I observe is a lot of guys that are super focused on solving a problem associated with the generator. And I went in, and thankfully, I didn't ask any questions except one: how can I help? And we were trying to refuel the small tanks attached to our generators so that they would start running again. And that story, again, is longer in the book, but in our debrief that we had as an organization, my team really credited one of the things that I did to helping solve this problem. And it had nothing to do with the mechanical side. It was the fact that I didn't come storming into the facilities department demanding an answer as to why our emergency generators weren't running. Honestly, what was going through my head was I just wanted the power back on. So I wasn't really interested in why at that moment. But they commented that my calmness and the way I approached it and my willingness to grab a bucket and grab diesel fuel and start helping pour contributed to solving the problem. And we would figure out why it happened later. But the point of the week one lesson is that our negative emotions get the best of us sometimes. And negative emotions are any emotion that causes you anxiety, fear, you have self-doubt, anger. Just pick any emotion you can think of that negatively affects you, and it's how you manage those. My big point is never to ignore those emotions, but to be very self-aware of how they change the way you function as a leader when you're feeling those emotions. And Lance, I think you've got a similar story, and I'd like for you to share that.
Yeah, sure. The story about the generator hit home. It's amazing how many times a squirrel gets on the transformer and blows everything. I've lost power at least twice the same way. So you just never know what's going to be in your day. But when the thing that was compelling about that story was, what was your motivation? What was your goal when you went into the plant ops office there to see what was going on? And it wasn't anything other than, what can I do in my limited capacity? Because you don't know how to fix a generator.
No.
What can I do to help? Your ultimate goal is, let's get the power back on so we can take care of patients. That was a pure motive. And I think, our words, our actions, they come through. And if you had to come in there with what's going on, what's happening here, I've got to explain to my board what, or whatever your excuse is, you weren't worried about yourself. You were worried about getting the thing taken care of in the best way possible. Then we'll figure out everything else later. We'll figure out why this happened later, but right now, let's just deal with the problem together as a team. And I think the fact that you know, were in control of your emotions, the fact that you laid it out that way, made a huge impact. One of the other emotions that we really didn't talk about in the book that much is empathy. And
Mhm.
that is something that you feel, and one of the you know being in control, but also allowing, it's okay for people to see that you're happy. It's okay for people to see that maybe you're not so happy this time. But it's kind of the extremes of these. But empathy is one of those things that people do get worn out. They get, kind of a sympathy or empathy fatigue, where they just kind of, I care, I care, I care. Now I'm worn out. Um, my story is one of when I was very young. I was 29, 30 years old. I was walking down the hallway and I see a patient who was trying to navigate a wheelchair by himself, and he had a Foley catheter in. Well, Foley catheter, the bag was on the back of the chair. The tube ran under the chair, and we know where the tube went into the gentleman. And so uh, the tube got tangled up a little bit, and he was trapped. If he went forward, it tugged. If he went backwards, it tugged. He was very uncomfortable, and that there was nobody around. So I went over and said, "Hey, can I help you? I'm wearing a suit just like, normal." And he's like, "Man, I'm in a bind. I'm in a bind." And he's getting a little panicky. So so I started working with it. Next thing I know, I'm like a mechanic under a car. I'm laying underneath his wheelchair, and I'm trying to navigate this thing without hurting him and without, and I finally got it released. And he's like, "Oh, thank you so much." And I got it, tucked back in. And when I looked up, there were 10 to 12 staff members kind of circled around just watching. And I thought, I must have done something wrong. I don't know what this is. And everything okay? And they're like, yeah, yeah, good, good, good. Well, my chief nurse was around the corner, and she pulled me over to the side and she said, "That was impactful." And I said, "I don't understand." And she said, "That was the most humble position I've ever seen a leader get in. You literally were laying on the floor of this place, taking care of a patient." And she said, "That's going to be talked about for a long time." And I didn't do it for the show. I did it because a man needed help, just like you ran to do the generator. Uh, that sometimes using your emotions in a positive way, whether it's empathy or whatever, can be a real good demonstrator of how people should react in situations in the future.
No, that's a great story. And you, I mean, same as me, you didn't have like some kind of malicious or selfish intent. You were doing it because a problem needed to be solved, and if not you, then who? And we hear that phrase, but I don't know if we ever truly embrace it. One of the things I tried, and I did a lousy job of this early in my career because my age and starting leadership roles, I was afraid people were going to figure out that I didn't know what I was doing. And I was afraid people were going to figure out that I was probably over promoted. And truth be told, I was. I wasn't qualified necessarily for the jobs I had very early in my career. So I had that fear. And it turned into something that I really regretted later in my career. And that is that I wasn't really myself at work. Now, let me qualify that, okay? Because I'm just a simple person. Okay. I'm not, if it's up to me, I've got on my dirty khakis that I work in the yard in and have on my cowboy boots that I love to wear. I can do a lot more of that now that I'm retired. But that's my most comfortable state, is just to be like that and just to be a normal, real person, not someone that is trying to impress anybody else or do anything for attention. But I say all that to say, later in my career, I got very comfortable with just being myself. Now, that had limits. Okay. So I was not going, I didn't want to be viewed as, the figurehead of the organization and always with my coat on and always in charge. I didn't want to be viewed as an executive suit. But it had limits too, where, I believe some words don't have synonyms. And I've got a little bit of a mouth on me. I tend to cuss more than I probably should cuss. And I paired that back in the work environment, but I also tried to balance being just a real person, not be afraid to talk about, you know, uh, my family or to, talk about things that I enjoyed doing personally. Did Lance, did you have any of those epiphanies kind of during your career as you evolved and grew as a leader?
Yeah, I did, especially early on. And being a young leader is really, really tough because there's a lot of insecurities that come with that. There's a little imposter syndrome, a little bit. You feel like because you see older, more mature leaders, and you see you know how they are, and you compare yourself to them. And um, I read something a few years ago that young people starting out today, they look and see all the things that their parents have, the home, the cars, the furniture, and all that, and they think that's normal, and they have to go out and get it, and so they lease the car, they finance the furniture, they do all this, and they overbuy a home, not realizing that it took the parents 30 years to accumulate that stuff, right? But they
Right.
think they've got to have it right now. Well, I think the same thing happens as a young leader, is that you look at somebody who is a mentor, they're 25, 30 years older than you, and you think, I should be this good right now. And it takes time. And if I could go back to when I first started, I would probably say I don't know a lot more. I would probably say, what do you think we should do? And it doesn't mean I'm giving up responsibility, doesn't mean I'm giving up authority. It just means 30 years later, here I am, and I don't know everything. But it's a lot easier for me today to say, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we should do here. Let me think about it. But when I was younger, I felt like I had to have an answer right away all the time. And that meant I had to either later admit I was wrong, or sometimes I doubled down on a bad answer to make sure it became the right answer. And that was way harder. If I'd have just said, I'm not sure, um, we have a phrase here at work that we say quite a bit when we have a tough decision to make, and we say, load the boat. Don't go on this journey by yourself, right? Load the
Yeah.
boat. Put some other people in this boat that are smart who can help with the decision making. Now, ultimately, you're the one at the helm, like George Washington saying, paddle this way. But let's load the boat. Let's get more people in there who can help us make those decisions. And if I'd have done more of that when I was younger, uh, I probably would have had an easier time being a leader.
That's a great insight. Yeah, just the importance of not having to feel like you got all the answers. I had a very early mentor, and he said something to me, and it stayed with me for decades. But he said, "It's okay to say I don't know, but don't say it too often because then people will start thinking you don't know anything." And I remember him saying that. He said it like literally 2 months into my first hospital CEO job at age 27. And, here I am, 57, and I'm still thinking about it. Because it was freeing, and it also put a lot of pressure on me where I
Yeah.
felt like, okay, I've got to be careful. I've got to balance this. I've got to be cautious with it. And one of the most difficult times related to that actually just happened to me 6 years ago in the middle of COVID. I
Hmm.
was running a hospital on the coast of Mississippi. We had I think it was the second and the fourth confirmed cases of COVID in the entire state of Mississippi were at my hospital. And it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences I had as a leader, because the administration was situated was right next to the physician lounge, which was great, except during this time period.
Yeah.
It was great and it was horrible. And what I had developed a habit of doing for those first really 3 or 4 weeks of COVID was I would camp out in the physician lounge because nobody knew what was going on. And I needed to have the insight of all these experts. And I say it was a horrible time. It was definitely a horrible time for patients and for our community and for our staff. It was a horrible time for me too, because there was this intense pressure for immediate, fast decisions that
Hmm.
no one was willing to make. And they kept looking at me. I had a conversation, and I remember I had a pulmonologist, a nephrologist, I had a cardiologist. Who else was in the room? Infectious disease. I had all of these brilliant doctors that I admired exceedingly. I mean, they were really smart people, and I was so grateful they were there. But one of them looked at me in the middle of a conversation one day and said, "Tom, what do you think? Should we be placing these patients in a prone position?" And Lance, I never would say I had a panic attack during my time running hospitals. I never reached that point. I know a lot of people deal with that. I personally have never had to deal with that, but that is the closest I've ever come to a panic attack, where I actually had to stand up and walk around the room for a second because the pressure of that question asked to me scared the hell out of me. That all of these intelligent doctors that knew good and well I wasn't a doctor were asking me for my medical opinion of something. And the fear I was experiencing in that moment was because I thought, wow, what a bad spot we're in as an organization.
Yeah.
That they think I will have an answer to this question. But I was making decisions on everything else, right or wrong. We were making decisions and rolling with it. And to your point, just hoping we were right. We
Yeah.
didn't know if we were right or not. Um, but it's
No, that
how do you
time period was
balance
a real
that?
pressure cooker though.
It
And and
was.
and it
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 was.
it, it pressure tested everything that we do as leaders. And you and I were talking earlier about uh, pressure in that, and it was during that time period during COVID, because there were really two COVIDs in Mississippi. We had the first COVID, which was March, April, when it was
Mhm.
just out of control, and uh, you know, the world was shut down, and people were holding prayer vigils for hospitals and writing encouraging things on our sidewalk and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was kind of the glory days, if you will, of COVID, because everybody was in our corner. And then in the summer, things kind of dulled down, right? And then Thanksgiving hit, and everyone wanted to get together, and COVID went bananas after
It did.
that. And from Thanksgiving until New Year's, it was out of control.
Yeah.
And that was the time period where I was at work one evening. It was after 6:15 at night, and my dad called me. And my dad loaded bags on an airplane for 30 years. That was his job at the airport. And he called me at 6:15. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm at work." And he said, "Well, what do you do?" He didn't really understood. He didn't really understand what is it that you do. And we had been through a similar situation. I mean, we were at wit's end. We were out of ventilators. We had 4 times as many ICU patients as we had ICU beds, and we didn't have the supplies we needed. I mean, propofol was running out. We were having troubles, and everybody was frustrated. This had been going on for months, and they were tired. And I told my dad, I said, I've kind of realized that one of the most important things I do in my job is I absorb all the stress of this building so that my staff, that the patients, that the families, the medical staff don't feel as much so that they can take care of getting people better. And I mean, there were times when it was so intense during that pressure cooker that you just wanted to curl up in the fetal position. But when you're in front of everybody, you had to say, "We're going to be fine. We're going to do this together. We're going to get this." And then you go in your office, close the door, and sit there and just almost have a panic attack. And so I think that that is part of the controlling the emotions. Is that there are times when it is not beneficial to let those emotions out, right? And in a pressure cooker situation, you've got to be fighter pilot cool.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you do it though? What's the secret to maintaining that? Because that's the very core of this first week of the book is keeping those negative emotions under control. What strategies have you used to achieve that?
Yeah. So one of the things is that I've employed something called daily vacations. And
Okay. Tell me about this.
well, so a daily vacation is I always find 5 minutes every day during the day where I unplug, get up, get away from people, and I take a little mental vacation.
Hmm.
It's a time to stop and not think about work for a few minutes, not do anything. Maybe I'll look at pictures of my granddaughter. you know, maybe I do something that maybe I fill out my NCAA bracket. That might be a good thing to do, right? But you just stop and reset because what that does is give you some perspective. For 5 minutes, I'm not worried about all the hassles that are going on. I'm kind of doing normal life stuff. Take a little vacation. Maybe I just go get a cup of coffee and sit there and savor the cup of coffee for 5 minutes, right? But it's just a walk around the building, whatever it is, just something to break it up. Because what you end up realizing, the longer you do this and the more stress that you absorb, the more uh, power outages you endure, the more whatever, you realize they don't last very long.
No.
They're moments of time, and tomorrow people are going to forget about it. And so let's not get so worked up today that tomorrow they're talking about your behavior rather than the power outage, right? That, oh, did you see that? Lance acted like a complete idiot the whole time. He was yelling at people and doing all this. They're not even worried about the power went out anymore. They're worried about your reaction and behavior. So,
That's
little,
it's interesting you say that, and it just hit me that I've never heard of somebody saying, take a daily vacation. I've never heard that before. So that was very interesting to me. But it just hit me that I would do the same thing in my last CEO job, and I just realized why I was doing it. I wasn't even doing it consciously. So I'm having a little momentary epiphany on my own right now. um, I'm strange. I'm a simple person. So one of my favorite things to eat at lunch is a grilled cheese.
Mhm.
I don't know why. I just like a good grilled cheese. And the hospital where I was working, there was a guy named Michael there, and Michael was the happiest person. that you could ever imagine. But Michael made a hell of a good grilled cheese. And now that I'm thinking about it, I was doing this intentionally and unintentionally, subconsciously and consciously. But I would go get a grilled cheese every day at lunch, or most days that I didn't have a meeting or something else that interfered with my lunch moment. And my assistant would always offer to go get a grilled cheese for me. And I wouldn't let her. Number one, I can get my own grilled cheese. But
Right.
number two, I would go and, I mean, Lance, we were leaders in organizations. So if you walk up to the grill line and there's four people standing in front, everybody offers for you to go first. And I always insisted, no, I'm
No.
going to wait. I'm going to wait my turn. But I would stand there and have my own little daily vacation because
Yeah.
I got to chat with whoever was nearby. I got to just stand there and think for a few minutes, and I would wait my turn to get my grilled cheese and have what was a normal day conversation with Michael. Um, and and you're right. I mean, but I think that gets back to your point of taking just a moment to take a break and also taking a moment just to be yourself. You don't
Yes.
have to be anybody else, and you don't have to be the person in charge. You can be one of the team and wait your spot in line to get your sandwich.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. So I mean, those little breaks, those little normalcies that you get every day, they're important. And I think that yeah, I've never thought about waiting in line as a little break or vacation, but it is because um, sometimes if you don't have your name badge on, nobody knows who you are in there. And
We can only hope. No, unfortunately, they knew who I was, but it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, too. But
yeah.
it always made me happy that when I was standing there in line, somebody would tell me the latest story about their kids or their
Hmm.
grandkids, or, they would tell me about how their husband or wife were doing, or, we'd talk about a ball game or we'd talk about whatever. I always enjoyed that. It always made me happy when, somebody would come up to me and tell me the latest about what their grandkids did. Because number one, it made me feel like they at some level liked me or they wouldn't have bothered to do that. And so was it self-serving to some point? Yes. But it also made me happy that they were comfortable in doing that.
Yeah.
And that brought me joy. It brought me happiness that I could have those little mini conversations. Yeah, I would do walkabouts if I ever reached a point where, I needed a break, I would get out of the office and just go walk around the hospital without necessarily
Yeah.
a purpose. And just, take 5 minutes or take an hour, whatever I had available, and just go, sit behind the nurses' stations or go down to the cath lab and see how the recovery nurses were doing down there. Or go down to the facilities department, see what was going on, anything, just to get that little break.
Yeah. And it's fun doing that and going and asking the question, hey, can you tell me something great that's happened today?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about the coolest case you've seen this week, and let them, I like asking people, tell me about a patient case you've seen in the last week that reminded you why you became a nurse, you
Yeah,
know,
that's a
and,
great
and
question.
and I think those are fun things for people to be able to do, and it's inspiring. You know, reading the chapter and going through this, it made me think about. Um, there have been so many times when I've had supervisors that worked for me that got themselves in trouble because they got too emotional in dealing with a disciplinary issue,
Yeah.
and they down dress somebody in public. They they you know carried it too far with their emotions when they were addressing an issue, and you know, this is a good lesson not just for the top leaders in the organization, but it's a good reminder for everybody who supervises anyone that when you lose your cool, when you lose your emotions, you lose control of the situation. And how many times in your career Have you seen a manager address someone for the right reason, but do it the wrong way? And the focus all of a sudden becomes on how the manager treated the employee rather than
Oh,
the employee violated a work
absolutely.
rule.
Absolutely. The number of times that I had to have a conversation with a physician and
Yes.
say, hey, you are 1,000% correct, except you
Yeah.
handled it a
A
thousand
thousand
percent
percent
wrong
wrong.
because now it's gone from you being 1,000% correct to you mistreated somebody in this building.
That's right.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, it's not just physicians. It can be a leader. I mean, instead
Yeah.
of, with a smile saying, "Hey, John, can you come have a chat with me for just a moment?" Close the
Hmm.
door and with a deep breath, have a mature, rational conversation as
Yeah.
opposed to telling John what he did wrong in front of his coworkers. You're a thousand
Well,
percent correct.
and what often happens is we wait until we've had it up to here and can't take anymore. And instead of addressing it with the first time it happens, we wait and let it build and it builds. And as it builds, emotions build. And then that's it. I can't take it anymore. And it comes out way wrong. And so,
Yeah.
and they're shocked. They
Well,
had no idea.
yeah, and absolutely. And I that is one of the lessons I learned later in my career, and fortunately it stuck, was that if I wasn't exactly sure what to say and how to say it, don't say anything.
Mm,
I would rather just be quiet. Because the alternative is far worse.
mm.
I would rather somebody go, "Wow, did Tom just not have anything to say?" No, what was going through my head was far worse. That's not healthy or good for anybody.
No, no. Yeah.
Well, Lance,
Sometimes
this
it's,
has been awesome.
yep. Thank you.
I appreciate you joining us for this episode, and I definitely encourage everyone to listen to some of the other episodes. We'll be coming out with a number of them in the coming weeks and months. And Lance, I hope you will come back and join me again.
Be a pleasure. Thank you, Tom. Enjoyed the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Karma Leaders Podcast. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. The views and opinions are only those of the host and guests and are not legal advice.